What's up, everyone? My name is Ethan. Welcome to Splash City. If you're new, don't forget to subscribe. Did you know that 95% of the people who watch this channel are not subscribed? That's a really high number. I'd like to get that one down. So if you are not subscribed already and you watch this channel regularly, please consider hitting that button down below. It would really help me out a lot. And with that out of the way, let's get on with the video. Today we are talking about the Brooklyn Nets, continuing along with our offseason breakdown series. This is a team that had obviously very high expectations going into this season, and especially after they made that trade for James Harden. Injuries kind of slowed them down a little bit in the playoffs, but it's pretty clear that when this team is healthy, they're a juggernaut. They're very, very tough to beat. So they just have to cross their fingers, hope for health next year. There are some moves to be made around the margins. This is a roster that's kind of in flux aside from the three superstars, and this is kind of a prove it year because all three of them have a player option for the following season. So if things go bad for them this year, it could be really disastrous for Brooklyn. So let's talk about what they have to do this offseason. Let's jump right in with the cap sheet. James Harden, Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, all on very similar contracts. It's varying levels of compensation there, but for the most part, it's a max deal with one more season left, and then a player option for the following season. So all three of these guys have the option to be free agents after this year. And if I'm Brooklyn, that's not scaring me a ton, but it is making me a little bit uneasy, just because of the fact that if things go bad this year, or if the players start to squabble a little bit, I know that they're all friends, and that's why they wanted to play together. But we've seen this before where teams will kind of, super teams will form and they'll be really awesome for a couple of years, and then eventually egos start to get in the way and all that, and things break up quickly. So we'll see. If things go bad for them this year, I would not rule out one, two, or maybe even all three of these guys leaving. They're not scared to do it. We've all seen them do it before, leave teams in the dust. So that's something to at least monitor this year. But for the most part, I think they're going to be pretty okay, holding on to at least, two out of the three of these guys, hopefully all three. But that's something to watch. Is there a possibility that any of them get traded? I would say no on Harden and Durant. Irving, maybe. There is a little bit of smoke around Kyrie Irving potentially being a trade chip. But, there's a reason that he signed with Brooklyn in the first place. Him and KD both signed there to play together. And I'm sure that KD would not be happy if the team did decide to trade Kyrie without his permission. So I think any Kyrie Irving trade would have to have the permission of Kyrie, KD, James Harden, and the front office, and another team who they're sending him to. So a lot of people need to agree on that one. But I guess it is possible if they really feel like they have to shake things up, maybe at the deadline if things really aren't going well for them. But I highly doubt that. Other than that, Harden and Durant are both going to stay put. It's pretty, you don't trade guys like that without a trade request. And so, of course, they're going to remain on this team. Joe Harris is on that extension that he signed. He's got 3 more years at around $18-19 million per season. A lot of people are gonna, make memes about Joe Harris and kind of talk down on him after the playoff run that he had. He was not very good, especially in that Milwaukee series. Was really, really cold from the floor. Just shot really poorly in that one, and didn't look great. He's obviously one of the best shooters in the league when he's shooting well and when he's firing. But just like any shooter, he kind of goes through cold slumps and cold spells, and one of those just happened to hit in that Bucks series. So I'm not too worried about Joe Harris. I like what he provides to this team. This floor spacing is, obviously all three of those stars can shoot, but adding Joe Harris to that mix makes them that much tougher to guard. So I do like Joe Harris as a player. There's a possibility that they want to trade him maybe for some more defense or a big guy. I think that he would be an intriguing asset for another team to look at if he was made available, but I'm not quite sure that they're to that point this season. Like I said, maybe if things aren't going well around the deadline, you can maybe look at a Joe Harris swap, but I think that any trade for him would most likely be maybe, next offseason or one more year down the road. For now, I expect him to remain with the team. Spencer Dinwiddie has a player option for next year around $12 million. Interesting choice here for Spencer Dinwiddie because he is coming off that ACL tear. Most people are expecting him to opt out and seek a longer term, bigger contract in free agency, given that there are a lot of teams out there that are in need of a point guard. There's been a lot of rumors about him potentially going to Los Angeles, back to the Lakers or the Clippers or whoever. Either of those teams I think would be a good fit there for Spencer Dinwiddie, and they would both look to get their hands on him. We'll see, he could get himself paid in free agency. There's teams out there that need a point guard that have money to spend. A team like the Miami Heat immediately comes to mind, the Dallas Mavericks. There's lots of teams out there that would potentially be willing to throw a big offer at Dinwiddie. So I would expect him to opt out. Is there a chance that he's back with Brooklyn? Potentially, but they're already, sky high in luxury tax, paying those 3 stars at the top of the roster. So depends on how much they want to bring him back. They can just re-sign him. I believe they have bird rights. So they can just bring him back for really, you know, a higher number than any other team might be able to offer. But is that worth it when you're paying a ton of luxury tax stuff? And is he a little bit redundant with all these guys on the roster? I mean, he got hurt really early in the season, so we haven't really seen him with this iteration of the Nets. Obviously, it makes him very potent offensively, but is that really worth it? Would you like to distribute something better? Maybe you can sign and trade with him, get something back. So interesting free agency for Spencer Dinwiddie for sure. DeAndre Jordan has 2 more years, around $10 million per season. You know, on any other roster, he would clearly be a trade candidate, given that he's 33 years old, has kind of fallen out of the rotation, didn't play much in the playoffs, losing some of his minutes to some of the younger guys on this roster. You know, the team wanting to go small, especially after the buyout deadline, getting Blake Griffin in there. And LaMarcus Aldridge for a couple of games. So, you know, DeAndre is an interesting case on this team because, you know, like I said, on any other team, he would be a potential trade guy. But given the fact that he was part of the package deal of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving to come to the Nets team, given that he, you know, is friends with them and all that, and they wanted him on there, he was part of the package deal. That's why he's on the contract that he's on. That's why he signed there. So, you know, any trade for him would require approval from KD, Kyrie Irving, DeAndre Jordan, and the front office. So similar to the Kyrie trade, although I think this one is definitely much more likely. You know, kind of like the one that I was talking about with Kyrie earlier, this one is more likely to happen simply because if he's going to continue to have a decreased role on this team, and he's going to, you know, continue to lose minutes and maybe just not play very much at all next season, and he would rather go somewhere else where he could play, and the team looks like they need to make an upgrade. You know, both Kyrie and Kevin Durant agree, like, okay, yes, we do want to, you know, bring in somebody who's actually going to be able to play for us. Then there could be a trade where they send him somewhere where he can actually be a fit, or maybe there's a buyout in the works. I don't know, but I don't like his spot on this team next year. I don't think he's going to be in the rotation. I don't think he should be in the rotation, and they could use, you know, they could use that money in a better way than just having a, you know, 33-year-old center who's clearly washed up on the roster, you know, paying him $10 million. You'd rather pay somebody else that $10 million, you know what I mean? So I would expect them to, you know, at least think about exploring trade options for him. If Kyrie and KD are serious about really wanting to win a title, hopefully they would agree to a potential trade for DeAndre Jordan, but that is just something that we will have to wait and see on. I would like them to do it, but I'm not entirely sure if they will. Let me talk about the guys that are under contract, and then we'll go over free agents. Landry Shamet, Nick Claxton, both entering, you know, final contracts of their rookie deals. I believe Shamet is up for an extension. He was drafted in the first round, and this is entering his 4th season. So Shamet is a guy who is up for an extension this season, I believe. Not sure if they'll give it to him. You know, he's been on a couple of different teams at this point, bounced around, and played for a couple of different contenders. Shamet's a nice player. You know, he's kind of a streaky shooter, but he can provide some really nice spacing for you and add some even more potent offense to this roster. So I think I don't know if they're going to extend him this offseason. He could be a guy thrown into a trade, you know, package him and DeAndre Jordan together, get you back something nice. You know, him and maybe future picks, although they've kind of traded all their future picks away for James Harden, so, you know, maybe 2nd round picks, I don't know. But Shamet could potentially be a trade guy. I would expect him back, and I would expect no extension on him. And then Nick Claxton really played himself into a decent role this year. I really like him as a prospect, only 22 years old, and he's come a long way in just a couple of years in the NBA. So I would hold on to him. I would not put him in a trade and try to bring him back when he does hit free agency next summer. I do really like Nick Claxton. And then Aliza Johnson is non-guaranteed for the next couple of years. You know, low risk, high reward signing. He's, you know, been able to get into a couple of games, and I thought he's shown some nice flashes there. So I would expect him back on that non-guaranteed contract next year as well. Okay, now to free agents. Jeff Green really showed, you know, he's a valuable part of this team this year. He played a lot of minutes. He was the small ball 5 at points. If not, he was playing good minutes at forward. He was defending well. He was hitting his threes. Jeff Green is an important piece to what this team does, and he's going to be 35, but I still think he can be productive next year, so I would hope that they bring him back on another veterans minimum deal. Could he potentially get a raise somewhere or want to go play for a different team? I'm not sure that there's a team out there with a better role for him than Brooklyn, so I think the only reason he would leave is for money reasons. So if there's another, you know, contender out there that wants to offer him a full mid-level exception, maybe he would consider leaving Brooklyn, but for now, I think this is a really good pairing between team and player, and I would expect him back for another one-year deal. Tyler Johnson, you know, he was an okay backup point guard option off the bench. You know, got minutes at spot points, not really a ton of minutes there for Tyler Johnson. So, you know, I'm not opposed to another one-year minimum deal, but I don't think that's super necessary either way. TLC, Timothé Luwawu-Cabarrot. He's okay. You know, he's a nice floor spacer. I liked what he showed in the bubble last year. Didn't play him a ton this past season, but I do like what he provides off the bench as a cheap option there. I think, you know, if you can bring him back on a minimum, maybe even a little bit more than that, you know, give him part of your mid-level or whatever, I do think that he's a guy who makes sense on this team to come back and give you some minutes at, you know, just off the bench as a shooter. Bruce Brown is going to be a restricted free agent. I would expect him to get anywhere between $12 to $15 million a season, maybe a little bit more than that, depending on what the market looks like for him in restricted free agency. He really fits well with what the Nets do. You know, he's played really any position this year. He was able to switch like 1 through 5, very malleable, very switchable offensive and defensive player. So Bruce Brown is a guy who, you know, was really capable of filling many different roles for them, and he was good for them this season. So I think that he should be a high priority for them to bring back. He fits better here than he does on really any other roster, in my opinion. But I think that there will be teams out there that are interested in bringing him in, and given that he's restricted, you know, you might have to overpay a little bit to keep him. So whether or not you bring back, you know, a guy like Spencer Dinwiddie, Jeff Green, that could maybe impact your ability to bring back Bruce Brown because you go so high on the luxury tax, but I think that should be a high priority for them. And then Blake Griffin, you know, similar to what I've said about all these other free agents, I think he's a good fit with this roster, what they're trying to do. He played well for them when he was there this season, and I think they should just bring him back. You know, mostly run this same team back next year, and I think they should be okay. You know, Griffin is he can still play. You know, he's obviously not going to be back to all-star status or anything like he was a couple of years ago, but if you can get him back on another minimum, he might get himself paid. You know, it was interesting conversation given how well he played late in the season and in the playoffs. He could have earned himself, you know, upwards of $10 million per season on maybe like a 1 or 2 year deal. So I would not be shocked if they had to kind of pay a lot to bring him back. I don't believe they have his bird rights, so they probably shouldn't. They wouldn't be able to, you know, match any contract offer of anything, you know, higher than a mid-level exception. So maybe you give your full mid-level to Blake Griffin just to bring him back in the roster. If he wants to come back on another minimum, I think that's a steal. But given how well he played, I'm not entirely sure that they will be able to retain him. So we'll see on the Blake Griffin front for sure. And then a couple of two-way guys down here, Chris Giozza, Mike James, and Reggie Perry. Reggie Perry, young guy, I expect them to bring him back, whether that's on another two-way contract or on a minimum, you know, up to the regular roster. He's a guy drafted late in the second round last year, but has a lot of potential and hasn't played too much, but I think, you know, his youth and his potential should earn him a spot on next year's team. Chiozza honestly didn't play too much this year. I don't know too much about him, but I'm not, you know, I don't think that he's worth bringing back, really, if he hasn't been able to get on the floor. And then Mike James actually gave him some nice minutes, you know, late in the season and in the playoffs when they brought him in for that little stretch run that they had. Probably bring him back on another 1 year minimum deal if he wants to. I think that'd definitely be worth it for both sides. So now let's talk about the draft. They actually have, you know, a couple of draft picks this year, which is weird because they traded a lot of them for James Harden, and going forward, they're not going to have many picks at all. But they do have number 27 in the first round, so right at the end of the first round there. And then they have 3 second-round picks, number 44, number 49, and number 59. So 3 swings in the second round, you know, to potentially add a young big man to the roster. We know they need help at the big man spot. You know, another highly defensive wing, you know, a guy who could potentially pan out. You know, second round picks, you're not expecting them to really do much in their first, you know, rookie season. So not expecting a ton there. Maybe they trade some of them if they want to upgrade, you know, include those in maybe a DeAndre Jordan trade like I talked about, or a sign and trade for Spencer Dinwiddie and potentially get somebody back. They also have number 27 in the first round. Like I said, you know, target maybe a big man or a defensive wing, I think, are their 2 biggest needs in free agency in the draft. But, you know, I've said this over the past couple of days when talking about these teams picking late in the first round, but this is one of the deepest first round classes in the past couple of years, at least in my opinion. And I know a lot of other, you know, draft people feel that way as well. But the work that I've done scouting the draft, I think that the late first round is really going to be a nice place to find some talent. So Brooklyn should be able to find a good player there. There should be a good fit for their roster, and I would not trade that pick. I would actually keep it and try to draft somebody who you feel like can contribute in their first season. Maybe including a couple of those second round picks to trade up a spot or 2 is an option for them if there's another team that wants to flip down a little bit, if you really feel like you want to get a player, or like I said, including a couple of those seconds and maybe a sign and trade involving Spencer Dinwiddie and getting a different player back so that you don't lose that salary spot. I think that should be really their plan in the draft. But like I said, a big man and a defensive wing, I think, are their 2 biggest needs right now. But yeah, I mean, I think this team really just needs to run it back. People are going to point to this, but one of the biggest reasons that they did lose this year was because of injuries. I know that the Bucks went on to win the title, and they're very, very deserving. But it was a really, really tight series for them against the Nets. Obviously, Kevin Durant, foot on the line on a game what would have been a game-winning three-pointer. It was a 2 and sends it to overtime, and the Nets eventually lose. Obviously, James Harden missing games in that series, Kyrie Irving missing games in that series. So assuming that they are healthy next year, they probably should be the title favorite. I know that they already are the betting favorite. I saw the odds come out this morning, and they are the betting favorite to win the title next year. And I think that's more than fair, especially going into the playoffs this year. Looking at the way things were, I even made a video about saying is anybody going to be able to stop the Nets? And my conclusion was probably not unless they got hurt. Well, guess what? They got hurt. So we'll see. Hopefully for them they're healthy next year, and they should be the favorite if they are. But there are some moves to be made, I think. Like I said, you probably need another big guy. You need, somebody who can help defend on the wing, because this team's defense was actually okay. A lot of people are like, well, they don't have any defense. Their defense was middle of the pack, after the Harden trade. They were fine. They weren't amazing, but they were okay. And the offensive firepower more than makes up for it. So they don't need to have a top 5 defense in the league in order to be a good team. You can live with top 15, but you do need some help in that way. And then, finding another big guy. Nick Claxton can play for you. Blake Griffin's a small ball center. Bruce Brown potentially, but you might lose a couple of those guys. And then as well, DeAndre Jordan's kind of washed up. He can't really play anymore. So you do need another big guy to add to the rotation. Even if he's not going to start for you, potentially just having somebody besides that you can bring off the bench in case of a certain matchup or whatever, that should be a priority for them. But yeah, if they're healthy, they're going to be the title favorite, and I think everybody's okay with that. But there is an injury history for all 3 of their stars now, and so it's kind of a question mark for them, and that's really going to be the big deal for them all year. And that's just where we're at with this team, and it's kind of been the case, for the super team Warriors for the past couple of years. The Lakers were not that good this year because they got hurt. It's just part of the game. But if the Nets are healthy, they do on paper have the best roster in the league. But yeah, that's all I have on the Brooklyn Nets. So like I said at the top of the video, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, leave a like, ring the bell if you want to. Leave a comment letting me know what you guys think about the Nets. Are they going to win the title next year? I mean, like I said, a lot of it depends on health, but I would love to hear your opinions on that down in the comments below. If you are not subscribed already, please consider doing that. It would really help me out a lot. And with all that said, I will see you guys in the next one.